You are ready to launch your Airbnb. Have you done the most important piece of research? Do you know what laws and regulations apply in your area? Well, stay tuned to find out how you can identify what these are, how they apply to you, and what you need to do to make sure that you are compliant with any rules and regulations for short-term rentals in your area. When it comes to short-term rental regulations, there are a few pieces of information that you need to have to form the basic level of understanding. The first is, how is a short-term rental in your area defined? Typically, the definition for a short-term rental varies from city to city, county to county, but there are some commonalities. Usually, short-term rentals are for stays less than 30 days, and they are in exchange for pay. And they don't involve a lease agreement between the tenant and the landlord. They operate on sites like Airbnb or VRBO. The other thing that you need to understand is whether or not there are existing short-term rental regulations in your area, or whether any are coming. So how do you find out? The first thing that you'll want to do is just your basic Google search. Short-term rental regulations, short-term rental rules, short-term rental ordinances, and see what comes up. The regulations that may exist in your area, they can be different types. So that's what I'm going to go over next. The first type of short-term rental regulation will have to deal with the length of time that a property or a room in a home can operate as a short-term rental. This can be limited to a certain number of calendar days in a year, be that 30, be that 60, it could be 6 months, but there is a limited amount of time in any given year where a property or a room within a property can operate as a short-term rental. And once you have reached that limit, it can no longer be operated as a short-term rental. Another type of regulation that exists has to do with the residency of the owner of the property. So there are some localities within the United States that say an owner of a property can operate a short-term rental if he or she lives on the premises. So that could look like an owner of a property renting out rooms in their home, or the owner of a property that has, say, another house on the property, an accessory dwelling unit, that's typically called, that they rent out. So the limitation could be, yes, you can operate a short-term rental, but the owner must be on the premises. The other type of limitation that can exist, a regulation or ordinance for short-term rentals, can deal with where a short-term rental can operate within the locality. So that could be limiting short-term rentals to be within like a business zone or commercial zone, so they can only exist in those zones, city or county. They could be limited to existing within, certain neighborhoods or areas. They could be limited to certain streets or even certain sides of the street. So looking at what specific zone can short-term rentals operate, that can be another type of limitation. Now there's another type of short-term rental regulation that can exist that fully permits short-term rentals being in operation in a given area, any number of calendar years in any location. However, the owner of that property has to apply for a license and have a certification or other permit that allows them to operate. And usually that includes paying a fee in order to have that license or permit, or it could mean being subject to additional requirements such as safety provisions or having to provide information of who the host is, who the point of contact, who can be reached in case of an emergency. Those are the 4 different types of short-term rental regulations that are in existence, and any location could have one or more of these. So you'll want to pay attention to make sure that you are doing very thorough due diligence and understanding whether the short-term rental regulations exist, what type are they, under what conditions can a short-term rental operate, and what do you have to do in order to make sure that your short-term rental is perfectly legal. You also want to see if those regulations don't already exist, are they coming? And just because they don't exist doesn't mean that, they can't be promulgated by your city or by your county. And the last thing that you want to do is wake up one day and suddenly your business is illegal and it could get shut down. This has certainly happened in some locations where they have instituted regulations and they did not grandfather in the people who had those short-term rental businesses in operation. So you'll want to be sure to know, are these things coming? What can I do to make sure that I get everything in place so that my short-term rental is in compliance when these do come into effect? If you do happen to find yourself in violation of any short-term rental regulations, the best course of action is to just remedy the issue. If there's a fine, pay it. If there's something that you need to put in place in order for it to be legal, do that, take that action so that you can be in compliance and that you have the peace of mind knowing that your business is legal. I mean, the last thing that you want to do is to feel like you're sneaking around, and your business could potentially get shut down overnight, impacting the way that you earn income. So make sure that if you ever are in violation, that you do your research. What is the nature of the violation? How can I remedy it? And then take that action and operate your business legally. So that's it. That's today's video on short-term rental regulations. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you so much for tuning in.